It was supposed to be a dream holiday, a quiet seaside resort, a family of 5, far from home, seeking sun, peace, and rest. A mother tucks her 3-year-old daughter into bed. A father kisses her goodnight. Friends laugh together over dinner, just a short walk away. But when the mother returns, the bed is empty. The window is open, and the child is gone. That child's name was Madeleine McCann, and her disappearance would become one of the most haunting mysteries of our time. Madeleine Beth McCann was born in May 2003 in Leicester, England. She was the beloved eldest child of Jerry and Kate McCann, both doctors, both hardworking, both devoted to their young family. Friends described Madeleine as bright, curious, with big green-blue eyes and a mischievous smile. She adored her little brother and sister, and she loved to explore. In late April 2007, the McCanns traveled with friends to the Algarve, a picturesque region in southern Portugal. Their destination: the Ocean Club Resort in Praia da Luz, a place of beaches, pools, and promises of relaxation. Praia da Luz was the perfect postcard. Whitewashed villas lined narrow streets. The ocean shimmered turquoise in the afternoon light. Tourists wandered through cafes and markets. The Ocean Club Resort offered tennis courts, swimming pools, and family-friendly apartments just minutes from the beach. It was safe. It was charming. It was the kind of place where nothing bad was supposed to happen. But sometimes, evil hides in the most ordinary places. The McCanns traveled with a group of friends, 7 adults in total, many of them doctors, all with young children. Each evening, the group would meet for dinner at the Ocean Club's tapas restaurant. The restaurant was only about 50 meters from the McCann's apartment, close enough, they thought, to check on the children throughout the night. And so, they developed a routine. They would put the children to bed, lock the doors, and take turns walking back every half hour to make sure all was well. It was a system born of convenience, but it was a system that would later be called into question. Thursday, May 3rd, 2007. The McCanns spent the day by the pool, playing with their children, soaking in the Portuguese sun. That evening, they returned to their apartment, bathed the kids, read them bedtime stories, and tucked them in. Madeleine, in her pink and white Eeyore pajamas, climbed in her bed beside her favorite toy, a soft, cuddly cat named Cuddle Cat. Around 8:30 p.m., the McCanns joined their friends at the tapas bar for dinner. The plan was simple: eat, drink, relax, and check on the children every so often. It was a plan they had followed all week. But this night will be different. Sometime after 10 p.m., Kate McCann walked back to the apartment for her turn to check. She entered the bedroom where the 3 children slept. Sean and Amelie, the twins, lay in their cots, sleeping soundly. But Madeleine's bed was empty. The window was open, the shutters raised. Kate rushed out, screaming, "They've taken her! They've taken her!" Within minutes, the entire resort was in chaos. Guests searched the grounds with flashlights. Staff combed the nearby streets. Police were called, but there was no trace of Madeleine McCann. The first hours of any missing child case are critical. But from the very beginning, mistakes were made. The apartment was not properly sealed. Dozens of people walked in and out, contaminating the crime scene. Vital evidence may have been lost forever. Police were slow to arrive. Roadblocks weren't immediately set up. The possibility of an abduction was treated with hesitation. And as the night dragged on, hope faded. Madeleine was gone. The disappearance of Madeleine McCann was unlike anything the world had ever seen. Within 24 hours, her face was on television screens across Europe. Within days, it was international news. A beautiful child taken from her bed in a foreign country. Distraught parents pleading for help. The media swarming like vultures. This was no ordinary missing persons case. This was the beginning of a story that would grip the world, divide opinion, and leave behind a mystery that remains unsolved to this day. In the span of minutes, a family's life had been shattered. A resort town was thrown into panic, and the world was about to witness one of the most haunting mysteries of the 21st century. What happened to Madeleine McCann on that warm spring night in Portugal? Was she abducted? Did she wander away? Was there something darker at play? Theories would multiply. suspicions would shift. The investigation would twist and turn for years. But the only fact that mattered was this: Madeleine McCann was gone, and no one knew where she was. Thursday, May 3rd, 2007. It was the McCanns' sixth night in Praia da Luz. The weather was warm, the air calm, and the evening began like so many before it. Around 6 p.m., Kate and Jerry brought their 3 children back to apartment 5A of the Ocean Club. They bathed them, dressed them in pajamas, and settled them in for the night. Madeleine wore pink and white Eeyore pajamas. Her favorite cuddly toy, Cuddle Cat, was tucked close by. The twins, Sean and Amelie, shared cots in the same room. At 8:30 p.m., the parents joined their friends at the resort's tapas restaurant. Just 50 meters away, the laughter of dinner would begin, while in the apartment, an unimaginable tragedy was unfolding. The McCanns weren't dining alone. They were joined by 7 friends, all parents themselves, all doctors or professionals. The group became known as the Tapas 7. Each night, they followed the same pattern: eat, drink, talk, and take turns checking on the children. It was a routine designed for safety and peace of mind. But on this night, the system would break down in ways no one could have foreseen. At 9:05 p.m., Jerry McCann excused himself from the table. He walked the short distance back to apartment 5A to check on the children. Inside, he found Madeleine and the twins sleeping peacefully. He adjusted their blankets, smiled, and returned to dinner. As he left, he ran into a fellow holidaymaker, Jeremy Wilkins, who was out with his infant son. The two chatted briefly near the apartment before Jerry went back to the restaurant. At this moment, everything still seemed normal, but someone else may have been watching. At around 9:15 p.m., another member of the Tapas group, Jane Tanner, left the restaurant to check on her children. As she walked past the McCann's apartment, she noticed something unusual. A man was crossing the street ahead of her, carrying a young child. The child was dressed in light-colored pajamas, her bare feet dangling. Tanner thought little of it at the time. Parents often carried sleeping children, but later, she would recall that the girl's pajamas looked eerily similar to Madeleine's. Was this the moment Madeleine was taken? At 9:30 p.m., another friend from the Tapas group, Matthew Oldfield, went to check on the McCann children. He entered the apartment, but did not step all the way inside. From the doorway, he saw the twins in their cots. He assumed Madeleine was asleep as well, though he didn't see her directly. It was a crucial missed opportunity, because if Madeleine was already gone, Oldfield never noticed. At around 10 p.m., Kate McCann returned for her turn. She entered the apartment and walked toward the bedroom. What she saw would haunt her forever. The window was open. The shutters were raised. The curtains fluttered in the breeze. The twins slept soundly, but Madeleine's bed was empty. Kate rushed back to the restaurant, screaming the words that shattered the night. "They've taken her! They've taken her!" Panic spread through the Ocean Club. Guests and staff searched every corner: the pool, the tennis courts, the parking lot, the beach. Police were called, but precious time slipped away. Hours passed before roadblocks were set up. Border alerts came too late. By the time authorities truly mobilized, Madeleine could have been anywhere. Witnesses later reported several suspicious sightings. Jane Tanner's sighting of a man carrying a child at 9:15 p.m. remained one of the most important clues. Another tourist claimed to see a man near the resort later that night, also carrying a blonde girl. A local resident remembered a strange vehicle parked near the Ocean Club. Yet none of these leads led to Madeleine. Each was a fragment of a puzzle that never came together. From the very beginning, errors plagued the investigation. The McCann's apartment was not immediately sealed off. Dozens of people, staff, police, neighbors, even tourists, walked in and out, contaminating the scene. Fingerprints, DNA, and fibers that could have provided crucial evidence were compromised. The crime scene, instead of being preserved, became chaotic. And in a case where every detail mattered, those mistakes would haunt the investigation for years. As dawn broke on May 4th, the search widened. Helicopters scanned the coastline. Police dogs combed the streets. Volunteers scoured the beaches. But Madeleine was gone without a trace. No ransom note. No demands. No clues. What happened inside apartment 5A between 9 o'clock and 10 p.m. would remain one of the great mysteries of modern crime. 1 hour. That was all it took. In the span of 60 minutes, a child vanished. Witnesses glimpsed fleeting shadows, friends checked half-heartedly, and a mother returned to an empty bed. But in those crucial minutes, the trail of Madeleine McCann went cold, and the world would never be the same. Just after 10 p.m. on May 3, 2007, the Portuguese police received the call. A 3-year-old girl was missing from her holiday apartment in Praia da Luz. At first, officers treated it like a routine case. Perhaps the child had wandered off. Perhaps she had hidden and fallen asleep somewhere nearby. But by the time officers arrived, panic had already swept through the Ocean Club. And what they encountered was not a controlled crime scene, but chaos. Inside apartment 5A, the scene was far from preserved. Dozens of people had come and gone. Family, friends, resort staff, even neighbors. The police found the twins still asleep in their cots, unaware of the chaos around them. But Madeleine's bed was empty. The window was open, the shutters raised. Potential fingerprints, footprints, and fibers were trampled over. Object removed. The McCann's friends touched doors and windows. By the time forensic teams arrived hours later, the apartment had been contaminated beyond repair. The first crucial opportunity to collect evidence had already been lost. Through the night, search teams scoured the resort and its surroundings. Locals joined in, combing fields, back alleys, and the nearby beach. Dogs sniffed for scent trails. Helicopters scanned the coastline, but there was no sign of Madeleine. By dawn, the worst fear had set in. This was no simple case of a child wandering off. Something darker had happened. Witness accounts trickled in. Jane Tanner's sighting of a man carrying a child at 9:15 p.m. gained immediate attention. The child's pajamas seemed to match Madeleine's. Another tourist, later, reported seeing a similar figure walking toward the beach. Police began working on the theory of abduction, that someone had entered the apartment and carried Madeleine away into the night. But while this seemed plausible, there was one troubling question. Why was there no sign of forced entry? The open window in Madeleine's bedroom became a point of fierce debate. The McCanns insisted they had closed it earlier that evening. Yet police noted there were no fingerprints on the window frame, suggesting a break-in. Was the window staged to look like a break-in? Or had someone entered and exited carefully, leaving no trace? To this day, the window remains one of the most puzzling details of the case. Within 24 hours, the media descended on Praia da Luz. Satellite trucks parked outside the Ocean Club. Reporters swarmed the McCanns. Cameras flashed as police came and went. Madeleine's photo was everywhere. Newspapers, television, posters plastered across Europe. This was no ordinary missing child case. It had exploded into the global spotlight. The attention brought urgency, but also chaos. And under the glare of the world's cameras, the investigation began to stumble. Portugal's Polícia Judiciária, or PJ, took charge of the investigation. Experienced in criminal cases, but unprepared for the storm of international attention, the detectives found themselves under immense pressure. They faced language barriers, intense media scrutiny, and criticism from British police who later joined the effort. The PJ favored a slower, methodical approach. But in a case where every hour mattered, delays proved costly. From the very beginning, police worked with multiple theories. Abduction by a stranger. Someone broke in and took Madeleine. Madeleine wandered off. She may have woken up and left the apartment on her own. An accident inside the apartment, and a cover-up followed. Each theory came with its own evidence and its own contradictions. And as investigators tried to untangle the truth, the world was watching every move. While the search intensified, the McCanns faced their own nightmare. They pleaded with the media, begging for Madeleine's safe return. They circulated posters and made televised appeals. At first, the world sympathized, but as the days turned into weeks, suspicion began to creep in. Why had the parents left 3 small children alone in the apartment? Why were there inconsistencies in the timeline of checks? Fair or not, the McCanns themselves soon became part of the investigation. Jane Tanner's sighting of a man carrying a child was turned into a sketch, released worldwide. The man became known as Tanner Man, but no one came forward. No suspect was ever identified. Years later, investigators suggested it may have simply been another tourist carrying his own child home from the creche. A clue that once seemed vital faded into doubt. It would not be the last time leads in the case led only to dead ends. By mid-May, Madeleine's face was one of the most recognized in the world. From Lisbon to London, posters showed her wide eyes and blonde hair. Pope Benedict XVI even met the McCanns, blessing a photo of Madeleine and praying for her safe return. But behind the prayers and posters, the investigation was unraveling. Leads went cold. Suspects turned into ghosts, and the pressure on Portuguese police grew unbearable. The first days of an investigation are critical. But in the case of Madeleine McCann, they were chaotic, confused, and filled with mistakes. The apartment was contaminated. Theories conflicted. Witness accounts clashed. And as days turned into weeks, the chances of finding Madeleine alive grew slimmer. What began as a desperate search for a missing child was about to transform into something far darker. An international storm of suspicion, media frenzy, and accusations that would divide opinion for decades to come. Within days of her disappearance, Madeleine McCann's face became one of the most recognizable in the world. Her wide eyes and small smile stared from posters in airports, bus stations, train platforms, and border crossings. Television channels across Europe and beyond ran her story on repeat. For millions, Madeleine was no longer just a missing child. She was a symbol of innocence lost, of parental grief, of a nightmare that could strike any family, anywhere. Kate and Jerry McCann became the center of the storm. Each day, they faced banks of cameras. They issued heartfelt appeals, begging anyone with information to come forward. They launched a campaign, Find Madeleine. Wristbands were sold, posters distributed, donations poured in. Celebrities, politicians, and even the Pope lent their support. The world rallied behind the grieving parents. At first, sympathy was overwhelming. But sympathy would not last. As the weeks dragged on with no answers, the tone began to shift. Why had the McCanns left their children alone in the apartment while they dined? Was it neglect, even if unintentional? Some questioned their decision-making. Others whispered darker suspicions. Could the parents themselves know more than they were saying? The McCanns were about to face a new kind of trial. Not in a courtroom, but in the ruthless court of public opinion. The British and Portuguese media painted very different pictures. In the UK, tabloids often portrayed the McCanns as victims of a cruel twist of fate, urging the public to support them. In Portugal, where the police faced mounting criticism, leaks to the press suggested inconsistencies in the parents' statements. Headlines began to accuse. Rumors spread. The idea that Madeleine might have died in the apartment and that her parents covered it up began to take hold in the Portuguese press. Tabloids thrive on drama, and the Madeleine McCann case provided endless material. Day after day, bold headlines speculated wildly. Alleged sightings, secret suspects, shocking new theories. Each claim fed the frenzy. Each rumor became tomorrow's front-page story. And in the middle of it all were Kate and Jerry. Grieving parents now forced to defend themselves not only against a faceless abductor, but against the suspicion of the world. By September 2007, the unthinkable happened. Portuguese police officially declared Kate and Jerry McCann arguidos, suspects in their own daughter's disappearance. The media went into overdrive. Front pages screamed accusations. Television commentators dissected every movement, every word, every expression. For the McCanns, the shift was devastating. Overnight, they went from grieving parents to suspected criminals in the eyes of millions. The scrutiny took its toll. Kate, in particular, became a lightning rod for criticism. Some commentators claimed her demeanor seemed cold. Others suggested her composure was unnatural. But grief has no script. And in the merciless spotlight of the world's cameras, every gesture, every word, every tear, or lack of tears, was judged. Meanwhile, Jerry fought back against the press, insisting on their innocence, vowing to never stop searching for Madeleine. Their marriage, their reputations, their very lives were put under a microscope. The disappearance of Madeleine McCann created what some called the Madeleine effect. Donations to missing children's charities surged. Parents across Europe changed how they traveled, no longer leaving children unattended, even briefly. At airports, at border crossings, posters of Madeleine were everywhere. She had become a symbol of vulnerability and of a world that suddenly felt far less safe. The relentless media coverage didn't just affect the McCanns. It placed enormous pressure on Portuguese investigators. Every leak, every rumor, every misstep was magnified. Criticism mounted that the police were incompetent, unprepared for such a high-profile case. In response, the PJ doubled down, leaking suggestions that the parents themselves were to blame. The battle between police and press became as much a story as Madeleine's disappearance itself. The media also amplified every alleged sighting of Madeleine across the globe. Morocco, Spain, Belgium, even Australia. Each sighting brought a new wave of headlines. Each claim gave hope and heart. A missing child had become a public obsession. A grieving family had become targets of suspicion. And the line between fact and rumor had been obliterated by the hunger for headlines. The truth of what happened that night was still missing. But the media had already written its own story, one that would shape the case forever. The media brought the world's eyes to Madeleine McCann. It kept her name alive. It raised millions to fund the search, but also turned tragedy into spectacle. It fed doubt, fueled suspicion, and placed unbearable pressure on a family already broken. And in the noise of headlines and accusations, one haunting truth remained. Madeleine was still missing, and no one knew where she was. By summer 2007, the Portuguese investigation had stalled. There was no sign of Madeleine, no confirmed suspect, no clear evidence. In the absence of answers, theories began to multiply. Was Madeleine abducted by a stranger? Was she taken by traffickers? Did she wake up, wander outside, and vanish into the night? Or was something darker, closer to home, responsible? The story of Madeleine McCann would soon become not just a mystery, but a battlefield of competing narratives. The most immediate theory, and the one the McCanns themselves believed from the beginning, was that Madeleine had been abducted by a stranger. The open window and raised shutters seemed to support this. Jane Tanner's sighting of a man carrying a child around 9:15 p.m. gave it further weight. Witnesses recalled unfamiliar men loitering near the Ocean Club that week. Some described suspicious vehicles parked nearby. The resort was known for its open layout. Apartments had easy access from public roads. Security was minimal. Could Madeleine have been targeted, snatched by a predator who had been watching the family? Police first looked at local workers, handymen, cleaners, even resort employees who had access to apartments. Several men were questioned, including a British-Portuguese man named Robert Murat, who lived nearby. Murat volunteered to help with translations for police, but his behavior raised suspicion. For months, Murat was considered a key suspect. His house was searched, his computers seized, but no evidence linked him to the disappearance. Eventually, he was cleared, and later won damages from newspapers that branded him guilty without proof. Other witnesses described strange men knocking on doors around the resort, allegedly collecting for orphanages. Police suspected these might have been scouts for a trafficking ring. Some holidaymakers recalled seeing men staring at the McCann's apartment during the days before Madeleine vanished. Were these coincidences or reconnaissance for an abduction? Another theory suggested Madeleine was the victim of a burglary gone wrong. Praia da Luz had reported break-ins in the weeks leading up to May 3rd. Thieves often targeted holiday apartments, stealing electronics and valuables. Could intruders have entered the McCann's apartment expecting an empty flat, only to panic when they found children inside? In this scenario, Madeleine may have been silenced or taken in haste. But police found no evidence of stolen goods, no forced entry, no burglary tools, and so the theory faded, though never fully disappeared. Perhaps the darkest theory was that Madeleine had been abducted by traffickers. Portugal's proximity to Spain, North Africa, and major shipping routes made it a potential hub for human trafficking. Witnesses reported seeing vehicles speeding away from Praia da Luz that night. Some claimed to see a blonde girl resembling Madeleine in Morocco in the weeks that followed. Each sighting fueled hope and fear. Could Madeleine have been smuggled out of Portugal within hours, lost to a network of traffickers? Police pursued leads across Europe and North Africa. But none ever led to Madeleine. A simpler possibility was that Madeleine woke up, found her parents gone, and went searching for them. Perhaps she opened the patio door or window, wandered into the night, and met with an accident. Dogs and search teams scoured the area. Wells, construction sites, and coastline cliffs were searched, but there was no trace of her. Could a 3-year-old simply vanish without leaving evidence behind? The theory remains possible, but unlikely. The most controversial theory was that Madeleine's disappearance was linked to her parents. By late 2007, Portuguese police, under intense criticism for failing to find Madeleine, shifted focus onto Kate and Jerry themselves. They were declared arguidos, formal suspects. The theory suggested Madeleine may have died accidentally in the apartment, perhaps from a fall or medication, and that her parents staged an abduction to cover it up. Forensic teams claimed to find traces of Madeleine's DNA in the boot of the McCann's rental car. Cadaver dogs alerted in the apartment. The headlines exploded. Suspicion turned into accusation. But was the evidence reliable? The DNA evidence quickly came under scrutiny. Experts admitted the samples were degraded and inconclusive. The so-called matches were not definitive. They could not prove that Madeleine's body had been in the car. The cadaver dogs, too, became a point of debate. Some argued their alerts were compelling. Others pointed out that dogs are not infallible and cannot serve as proof in court. Ultimately, the case against the McCanns collapsed under lack of evidence. In 2008, they were formally cleared. But suspicion lingered, fueled by tabloids, conspiracy theories, and online sleuths who remain divided to this day. Over the years, many names surfaced as possible suspects. Robert Murat, the British-Portuguese resident wrongly suspected early on. Christian Brückner, a German man with a history of child abuse, later declared a prime suspect in 2020. Local workers and petty criminals, questioned but never charged. Each time, the media roared with speculation. Each time, the leads fizzled out. After years of investigation, Operation Grange, the UK's review of the case, leaned most heavily toward the theory of abduction by a stranger. The idea of trafficking or a targeted kidnapping remained on the table. But with no body, no confession, no forensic proof, the truth was as elusive as ever. And every theory left the same haunting question. If Madeleine was taken that night, where is she now? Abduction, accident, cover-up, trafficking, wandering into the night. Each theory has its supporters. Each has its flaws. For every piece of evidence, there is a counter-argument. For every suspect, there is doubt. And so, 17 years later, the disappearance of Madeleine McCann remains a labyrinth of theories without resolution. But the search did not end there. In the years that followed, new investigators, new suspects, and new technology would breathe fresh life into the case and raise hopes that the mystery might finally be solved. In the early weeks after Madeleine's disappearance, Kate and Jerry McCann were seen as devastated parents, desperate, grieving, pleading for the safe return of their daughter. But by late summer 2007, everything changed. Under mounting pressure and global criticism, Portuguese police made a stunning move. They declared the McCanns themselves arguidos, official suspects in their own daughter's disappearance. The world gasped. How could parents who begged for help be accused of hiding the very crime they claimed to suffer? The shift in suspicion came after forensic testing. Investigators claimed that DNA linked to Madeleine had been found in the boot of the McCann's rental car. a car they had hired weeks after she disappeared. Cadaver dogs brought in from the UK reportedly alerted to the scent of blood in the apartment and the car. To detectives under fire for failing to solve the case, this seemed like a breakthrough. Perhaps Madeleine had died in the apartment. Perhaps her parents had covered it up. But the science was far from clear. Experts quickly pointed out flaws. The DNA samples were tiny, degraded, and mixed with other profiles. They were not strong enough to prove Madeleine's presence in the car. As for the cadaver dogs, while highly trained, their alerts are not absolute proof. Scent can linger, and dogs can make mistakes. What Portuguese police presented as damning evidence was, in reality, far from definitive. But once suspicion takes root, it spreads like wildfire. When news broke that the McCanns were now suspects, the media frenzy exploded. Portuguese papers splashed accusations across their front pages. Secret cover-up, hidden body, suspicious behavior. In Britain, the press was divided. Some defended the couple fiercely. Others began asking hard questions. On talk shows, in pubs, and across the internet, public opinion fractured. Were the McCanns victims of a cruel twist of fate, or had they staged a terrible deception? Kate McCann, in particular, bore the brunt of suspicion. Critics analyzed her every word, every facial expression. Some said she appeared too controlled, too unemotional. Others argued she was cold, detached. But grief has no script, and under the relentless glare of cameras, Kate's composure was treated not as strength, but as evidence of guilt. It was character assassination on a global stage. In September 2007, both Jerry and Kate were formally questioned by police. Kate, in particular, faced grueling interrogations. Detectives pressed her on inconsistencies. Why had she cried out, "They've taken her," instead of simply saying Madeleine was missing? Why had she washed Madeleine's cuddle cat, potentially destroying evidence? The questions cut deep, but yielded no confession, no proof. Kate and Jerry insisted, again and again, on their innocence. Their only crime, they said, was leaving the children alone that night. Unlike many suspects, the McCanns did not retreat into silence. They fought back. They hired lawyers, public relations experts, and forensic specialists. They challenged every claim, every leak, every accusation. They launched libel actions against newspapers that defamed them, winning damages that helped fund the continued search for Madeleine. And they refused to let the suspicion silence their campaign. Instead, they doubled down, traveling the world to keep Madeleine's name alive. By July 2008, more than a year after Madeleine vanished, Portuguese authorities admitted what critics had long argued. There was no evidence against the McCanns. Their arguido status was lifted. The case against them collapsed. And yet, the damage was done. In the eyes of many, suspicion lingered. Online forums buzzed with conspiracy theories. Tabloids continued to exploit the drama. Once accused, never forgotten, the stain remained. The McCanns' ordeal highlights a grim truth about high-profile crime. When police fail to find answers, suspicion often falls on those closest to the victim. When the media smells blood, stories are sold not on facts, but on fear. And when the public demands someone to blame, parents become both victims and villains. The McCanns were cleared, but in the story of Madeleine, they remain both central figures and lightning rods for controversy. Grieving parents, or guilty conspirators, the world could not decide. For Portuguese police, the McCanns were convenient suspects. For the media, they were an endless source of headlines. But with no evidence, no confession, no body, the truth was as elusive as ever. And as the years passed, attention turned elsewhere. New investigators, new suspects, new hope that the mystery of Madeleine McCann might still be solved. But the question lingered. Had the focus on the McCanns wasted precious time? Time that could have been spent finding their daughter? By 2009, 2 years after Madeleine vanished, the case had gone cold. Portuguese police had closed their investigation. The McCanns were cleared, but no closer to answers. Theories circulated endlessly, but evidence remained thin. Madeleine was still missing. And then, in 2011, a new chapter began. At the request of the British government, the Metropolitan Police launched a fresh review of the case. It was called Operation Grange. Dozens of experienced detectives poured over tens of thousands of pages of evidence, both from Portuguese police and private investigators hired by the McCanns. The goal? To re-examine everything with fresh eyes, modern techniques, and no bias. For the first time in years, hope flickered. Operation Grange quickly grew into one of the largest and most expensive investigations in Scotland Yard's history. Over £12 million was spent. More than 600 people of interest were examined. Thousands of leads were chased. Detectives traveled to Portugal repeatedly, working alongside, and sometimes clashing with, their Portuguese counterparts. The case that had once seemed frozen was suddenly alive again. After years of speculation, Scotland Yard narrowed the focus. They dismissed the theory of parental involvement. There was no credible evidence to support it. Instead, they looked closely at burglary and abduction scenarios. Could thieves have broken in, startled by Madeleine waking up? Could opportunistic predators have targeted the apartment? Detectives believed Madeleine's disappearance was most likely a criminal act by someone outside the family. Through Operation Grange, several new suspects came to light. Groups of men who had been spotted loitering near the Ocean Club in the days before Madeleine vanished. Burglars known to target holiday apartments in Praia da Luz. Individuals with histories of sexual offenses against children. Phone records placed some of these men near the McCann's apartment that night. For a moment, it seemed the mystery might finally break. In 2013, detectives made an appeal on British television. They released 2 new e-fits of men seen near the Ocean Club on May 3rd. Millions watched. Thousands of tips poured in. But once again, no arrest followed. The suspects melted back into the fog of uncertainty. In June 2020, a shocking announcement shook the case once again. German prosecutors revealed that they had a new prime suspect, Christian Brückner. Brückner was a convicted pedophile and rapist. At the time of Madeleine's disappearance, he had been living in Portugal, not far from Praia da Luz. He had a history of breaking into holiday homes. He drove a camper van. Phone records placed him near the Ocean Club the night Madeleine vanished. For the first time, authorities declared publicly they believed Madeleine McCann was dead and that Brückner was responsible. But even here, the evidence was circumstantial. There was no DNA, no eyewitness placing Madeleine with Brückner. No confession. German prosecutors insisted they had concrete evidence of her death, but they have never revealed it publicly. Brückner remains imprisoned in Germany for other crimes. He has denied involvement in Madeleine's disappearance. And so, even the strongest lead in years remains unproven. One of the strengths of Operation Grange was technology. Old evidence was retested with advanced forensic methods. Phone records were mapped with new precision. International databases were searched for matches. The work gave fresh clarity to timelines and suspects. But still, no breakthrough definitive enough to close the case. For Kate and Jerry McCann, Operation Grange brought renewed hope, but also renewed anguish. Each new lead raised expectations. Each failure crushed them again. They remained steadfast until there was proof they believed Madeleine could still be alive. To them, hope was not optional. It was survival. As of today, Operation Grange has been scaled back. Funding continues in small amounts, but after more than a decade, Scotland Yard admits the investigation is winding down. German prosecutors continue to pursue Christian Brückner, but no trial has yet begun. The mystery remains. Madeleine's face, now digitally aged, still appears on missing person alerts. She will be 22 years old today, and until the truth is known, her story will remain one of the most haunting unsolved cases of our time. From Portugal to Britain to Germany, the search for Madeleine McCann has spanned continents, consumed millions, and lasted nearly 2 decades. And yet, the simple question remains unanswered. What happened to a 3-year-old girl sleeping in a holiday apartment in 2007? Theories abound. Suspects rise and fall. Technology advances. Investigations continue. But until the day evidence speaks, the case of Madeleine McCann will remain frozen in time. And the world will go on asking the same haunting question: where is Madeleine? Most missing child cases fade from the headlines within days. But Madeleine McCann's story never disappeared. 17 years later, her name still fills newspapers, documentaries, and online debates. Why? Because her disappearance represents the perfect storm: a beautiful child, a picturesque holiday, desperate parents, an investigation riddled with mistakes, and a mystery that refuses to be solved. For parents, Madeleine became a symbol of vulnerability. She represented every parent's nightmare, that a child could vanish in an instant from a bed that should have been safe. Across Europe, families changed their habits. They stayed closer, watched more carefully, locked doors tighter. The disappearance of Madeleine McCann reminded the world of a chilling truth: safety is never guaranteed. The case triggered what some called the Madeleine effect. Donations to missing children's charities surged. Governments reviewed cross-border police cooperation. Airlines, hotels, and resorts adopted new child safety policies. Madeleine's disappearance reshaped how Europe thought about child protection, leaving a legacy far larger than the case itself. But the case also revealed the double-edged sword of media. The press kept Madeleine's name alive. It ensured her case was never forgotten. It raised millions to fund searches. But it also exploited tragedy. It fueled conspiracy theories. It turned grieving parents into villains. The media was both lifeline and executioner, proof that attention can be salvation and destruction all at once. The story of Madeleine endures because it remains unfinished. We are haunted not by what we know, but by what we don't. No body, no confession, no trial. Every theory is possible. Every suspect is suspicious. Every clue is contested. And so the mystery lingers, refusing to let us go. Madeleine would be 22 years old today. Her parents still cling to hope that she is alive, that she will come home. Each year, they release statements. Each year, they hold vigils. Each year, they wait for the phone call that may never come. For them, hope is the only option, because to give up would be to accept a nightmare they refuse to believe. And so we are left with questions. Who was the man Jane Tanner saw carrying a child that night? Was Christian Brückner truly involved, or just another name in a long list of shadows? Did Portuguese police lose the chance to solve the case in those first chaotic hours? And most haunting of all, is Madeleine alive? The disappearance of Madeleine McCann is more than a case file. It is more than a news story. It is a wound that never healed, a question that was never answered, a name that became legend. Perhaps one day, technology will solve the mystery. Perhaps a witness will come forward. Perhaps evidence long overlooked will speak. Until then, Madeleine remains a ghost of modern history, a child who vanished into the night and into our collective memory. And as long as her story is told, one question will echo: where is Madeleine McCann? If you enjoy this, kindly subscribe, like for more.